I came home from work this past Monday, and my 4-year-old was waiting on me, which is always a good feeling. And he said, "Daddy, I've got a secret for you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "But we need to go upstairs so that Mommy in Montgomery can't hear it." I said, "Okay, this should be good." So we went up to his room and we closed the door. And I said, "Well, Clayton, what is it?" And he said, "Daddy, can I be in charge of the church with you?" And I thought there for a second, and I said to myself, "Clayton, be careful what you ask for." And then I thought, only if you can help me raise the budget this month, Clayton, then you can be in charge of the church with me. But that's our secret, so you can't tell him that I told you that. There's a story told about a man who went to church with his family, and on the way home, he was complaining about everything. He said, the music was too loud, the sermon was too long, the announcements were unclear, the building was hot, the people were unfriendly, and he went on complaining about everything. And finally, his very observant son said, "But Dad, you've got to admit, that wasn't a bad show for just $2. Today is Commitment Sunday here at Woodmont. And I'm always reminded of the preacher that stood up in front of his congregation. He said, "I've got good news and I've got bad news." He said, "The good news is we've got plenty of money to underwrite the operations of this church for another year. The bad news is it's still in your bank accounts." Today we're asking those of you who are members of this church to think about making a commitment to support the mission and ministries of Woodmont for another year. This is not for visitors, although we never turn away pledge cards from visitors, but these are for those of you that are a part of this church that want to continue to see Woodmont move forward into the future with its mission and its ministries for another year. This church was established in 1943. It was a church plant of Vine Street Christian Church, back when Vine Street was downtown. They wanted to plant a church in the Woodmont area, and so they did. This church was started in July, I think July the 18th, 1943. The first meeting was at Woodmont School over off of Estes, where Woodmont Park is now. Frank Jawoda was the first pastor. He came from Mayfield, Kentucky, was called to be the minister here. He moved his family down to Nashville, and so Woodmont started. It started in the mansion, which is the big house over here, and there was the property around. Dr. Jawoda pastored for the first 30 years. This sanctuary was built and completed in 1949, and it was dedicated that year. And then Dr. Jawoda stood in this pulpit in the summer of 1949, and he preached a sermon called The Open Door. And in that sermon, he said, "Doing the will of God does not stop at raising money and constructing buildings. The building of Christian lives is the business of the church." And now, for almost 73 years, Woodmont has been building Christian lives. Our mission is simple. We say it every week: growing disciples of Christ by seeking God, sharing love, and serving others. Everything that we do at this church should fall under this mission statement. Our core values are clear, built around the word Woodmont. We are a welcoming church, and we're always glad to have new people and want you to feel warm and welcome. We are a church that is committed to outstanding worship, and we have 3 different styles of worship on a given Sunday, 2 in the morning and 1 at night. We are a church that's focused on outreach, and there are many different outreaches that this church supports and is involved in. We're made up of different traditions and different denominations. That's what the Christian church is. We're a melting pot of different backgrounds, and we like it this way. We're passionate about mission and ministry. We want to be a missional church. We want our members to use their spiritual gifts to be involved in ministry and in mission. We want to be a church that's on the move, not just staying the same, not just doing the same old thing, but innovative, creative, and thinking outside of the box. We're nurturing. We nurture each other, and we pick each other up when life beats us down. And we're transforming. Ever since Dr. Jawoda first stood in this pulpit, this church has been about transforming lives. And we must never stop changing lives and transforming hearts. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, so that it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." As Christians, Jesus calls us to be salt and light, not just in what we say, but in what we do and how we interact. What is the church? That's a question worth pondering. I've been an ordained minister for almost 11 years. I come from a long line of ministers in this denomination. And so I think about that question often. What is the church? I can start by telling you what the church is not. The church is not a place where perfect people gather. It's not a place where people come to pretend like they have it all together, like they are perfect and without flaw. The church is for the broken, and all of us are broken. Jesus said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." So if you are broken, then you're in the right place. And if you have it all together, then I'd like to hear from you and find out how you do that. The church is not a place where we come to be right. We don't all agree on things, politics, social issues. At Woodmont, we never have, and we're simply honest about that. We're straightforward about that. We call that being real. Fighting over social issues, whatever they might be, for any church can become a major distraction from the mission. And it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about how we treat each other. Do we listen? Are we civil? Do we show respect and understanding? The church is not a place that exists to serve you and me. Sure, we have some great programs, great ministries, music, sermons, classes, but at the end of the day, the church is here to challenge all of us to go and serve the world and to spread the love of Christ, to put our faith into action, to help those who are in need. So if these things are what the church is not, then what is the church? Dr. Dewoto once said, "This is the church of my dreams, a church of the warm-hearted, open-minded, adventurous spirit, a church of the people, a church that is high, low, and broad, as high as the ideals of Jesus, as low as the humblest person, as broad as the love of God, a working, worshiping, and saving church, a church that interprets truth in terms of the times, but that challenges times in terms of the truth. A church that inspires courage for this life and hope for the life to come. A church that is worthy of our best." That's what he wrote years ago. What is the church? I would say that the church is called to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. We're called to live the way that Christ lived to the best of our ability. The church is called to heal because Jesus healed. To minister to those who are sick, who are grieving, who are lost, who are hungry, who are lonely, who have nowhere to turn. The church is called to love because Jesus loved. He said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, even if you don't agree with them, even if they've hurt you, even if they've made you angry. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." That's a good way to live life. The church is called to give comfort and hope because the world is a scary place and life is hard. Fear is everywhere, so is anxiety. But Jesus says, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about tomorrow. Today's trouble is enough for today, and oh, how true that is. The church is called to build bridges and to create peace because that's what Jesus did. The night before he was crucified, he prayed that all might be one so that the world would believe. We need more peace in this world. We need more peace in our relationships. In a world that constantly divides and pits us against each other, the church is called to unite, and we do that at the table every week. There's enough division. There's enough hostility, enough resentment in our world. The church is called to be the opposite of that. The bottom line is the church is called to change lives and to change hearts. Changing lives is our business. And at Woodmont, I see lives changed every day. Where do I see it? I see it in the preschool children that come here every day to learn and to go to school. I see it in the eyes of the children in Guatemala when we build them a house and now they don't have to live in a mud hut anymore. I see it in the people of Morgan Scott when we send a group up there to help them with whatever it is that they need because they live in abject poverty and they find out that there's some people from Nashville that care about them and that want to help them. I see it on the food project trucks when we send folks out into the community to feed people that are hungry, and that's one meal that they don't have to worry about where it's going to come from. I see it in the hospital rooms when somebody's about to have surgery and a minister shows up to pray with them. I see it in the faces of our youth who are in a difficult time in their lives where they need direction and they need guidance. I see it in people that are showing up for divorce care on Wednesday nights whose foundation has been completely ripped out from under them, and they're trying to find some type of hope so that they can move forward with their lives. I see it in AA and Al-Anon. I see it in the lifelong friendships that are developed in classes and small groups and fellowship dinners. I see it in worship when the choir sings an anthem or a solo and somebody is brought to tears by it. I see it in the outpouring of love that comes when somebody loses a spouse or their spouse is diagnosed with a terminal illness and they're reminded that they're not alone, that they don't have to journey by themselves. I see it in the gratitude that comes when somebody who can't pay their bills gets help from the church and gets them through a difficult period of time. Lives are changed on a regular basis through this church. God is at work in ways that we might never understand, and Christ can transform hearts, and he does transform hearts, and this community is making that happen on a regular basis. Last Sunday, I lifted up Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis, where he raises the question, why do some people live lives that are full of zest and commitment and meaning, but others feel as though their lives are empty and pointless? Why do some people live lives full of zest and meaning and commitment, but others feel as though their lives are empty and pointless? Do you ever think about that? He explores that question. He talks about happiness and meaning. He gives those three theories. One, that happiness comes from getting and achieving and acquiring. The problem is it's short-lived. Secondly, that happiness comes from within. The Buddhist approach, you got to detach yourself from the things that are outside of your control. The problem is we're social creatures. We can't totally do that. And then he develops the third theory, that happiness comes from between. It comes from getting our relationships right. It comes from getting our relationships right with our spouse and our family and our children and our friends and our work colleagues. And then you let happiness grow because it comes from between, and that's what happens in a community. I've been reading another book by Andy Stanley, the minister down in Atlanta. The book is called Enemies of the Heart. And he says that every single one of us has to pay attention to the state of our heart. And there are certain things that we have to watch out for because these are the things that work directly against our faith and against having a spiritual life. He names 4. The first, he says, is guilt. Feeling bad about something that we have done in the past. The second, he says, is anger. Being mad at others for something that they've done to us. He says anger is basically, it boils down to not getting what you want. The third, he says, is greed. And that's keeping everything that you have to yourself, usually out of fear that you're going to run out. The fourth, he says, is jealousy or envy. Wanting what others have that we don't. These are the things that work in direct contrast to the spiritual life, but yet these are the things that every single one of us struggle with on a regular basis because we are human. And this is real. And these are the things that Jesus wants us to overcome. We have to pay attention to the condition of our heart. And starting next week, I'm going to give a series called Matters of the Heart, where we talk about these things that we have to work through and overcome. So I invite you today to join with me in supporting Woodmont for another year. Generosity is a part of what we do as Christians. It's who we are. So let's work together to keep changing lives, to keep transforming lives, to keep serving, to keep helping others, knowing that it's up to every single one of us to make it happen. None of us can do it alone. We have to do it together. We have to do it as a community. And thank God we have this community. Amen.